Well, I think it's time we continue introducing the Heart of Thorns elite specializations. Today, touching on a medium armor class, the Scrapper. And it's really good timing for this video, actually, as the most recent balance patches, they've actually changed Scrapper a ton. So if you're a little bit out of date with the game, you might not know how this specialization is working anymore. But they had one update that radically changed the traits, and another one that radically changed the utility skills. In fact, I'd expect a couple more changes going forwards, but the foundations should generally be in place here. So yeah, let's run on through and see exactly what is going on. So first, let's deal with the items. Now you can actually see I'm in a Heart of Thorns outfit right now. That's the Jungle Explorer outfit. But if we go to my actual gear, the headpiece for this... Oh, no, we want to go wardrobe. The headpiece is the Scrapper's mask, as you can see here. Dyed a little bit ugly. But yeah, this is kind of cool mask. They actually eventually put some armors in the game where the headpiece can like lift up or go down, and there's different versions. And I think that would have been really cool for the Scrapper's mask too, but they've not really gone with that here. Scrapper as a specialization itself is kind of rooted in some Char lore, the idea of Scrappers working among the Citadel and the High Legions, but you're not restricted to just being a Char to be able to play this. Obviously, here you can see I'm on an Asura, and you get to be Scrapper nonetheless. Heart of Thorns itself, unlike the later expansion Path of Fire, didn't really do much with the lore angle, as we discussed, say, on the introduction of the Chronomancer, but Scrapper is one of those that does have a bit of a deeper tie to the game. In addition to that, you've also got the two weapons. The ultimate ascended upgrade is this. It's called the Fixer Upper. Maybe we have a better look at it specifically on the preview here. Fixer Upper. And indeed, that is what the specialization unlocks. Hammer, which we'll get into in a second. It's kind of a giant wrench, as you can see, and well worth picking up. This was one of the earlier ascended weapons I got from the expansion, and I don't regret it at all. Lastly, for items, we have the rune, Superior Rune of the Scrapper this time. And it's fairly representative of what the specialization is in terms of mechanics. Check it out. We've got power, and any power rune set tends to be a good one. It's complemented with toughness, and the T6 actually has synergy with that toughness. Its damage is reduced by 7%, and that's an okay amount, when your targets are within 600 units. So 600 units is pretty nice. It's a good radius around you, but it kind of means anyone in the area. I'm not going to go as far as saying melee, but close. People who are close to you, you will now take less damage from. So you're only really vulnerable to people sniping you from that 900 range, or even up to 1200 and the rare of 1500. If you're a Guild Wars 1 player, it's kind of the idea of being in the area, right? So it's kind of nice, and you'll actually notice that the price of these is, you know, around 3 gold at the moment. I'm not sure why. It is a rune set that I often find I avoid. If I'm looking for this particular setup, I'll tend to gravitate to something else, especially for PvP these days. But it's certainly not that bad as a set. And like I said at the start, this does really kind of represent what Scrapper's become. You'll notice there's quite a lot devoted to tankiness there, but also power. And that's kind of what, since the two reworks, the devs seem to be looking at Scrapper as. It's a specialization that is supposed to be pretty tanky, okay? And the way it stays tanky is through a little bit of aggression. When Scrapper was first released, it really wasn't in that space, but since Path of Fire, it lost its identity a bit. It was mostly being used just in the PvP formats because of its profession mechanic interacting with Resurrects and Stomps, which is really strong in PvP, but less strong in World versus World, and definitely not that strong in PvE. They don't introduce the downstate on opponents very much in PvE. They can, we've seen it a few times, but they've never really embraced it that much. Now, the devs, the community, I think, has quite often misinterpreted Scrapper then, for many years, as being a thing that deliberately was only ever meant to be a PvP class, but I don't know whether that's really true. I think that's just how it kind of ended up, and the recent changes have tried to broaden its application. Since Path of Fire, Scrapper has become much more about sustain and tanking, but also doing it around Barrier. Barrier is a Path of Fire mechanic that did not exist when Heart of Thorns came out, but this is a Heart of Thorns specialization now that's loaded with Barrier, and, well, we will come to that very, very shortly. So let's take a look, I guess, first of all, at the hammer skills. and we'll see some barrier on there straight away, and then we'll roll through the profession mechanic and what exactly is going on everywhere else. Hammer's a pretty fun weapon, and I think people underestimate it quite often just because of how strong its auto attacks are. So the auto attack is a chain, positive strike into negative bash into equalizing blow. I love the flavor of these names, but, you know, the auto attack chain names, most players never really memorize those skills. But check it out. The first one gives you might, the second one gives you vulnerability, and the third one gives you triple might, triple vulnerability, and a massive strike on it. They all cleave for 3 targets as well. So let's see if we can find something to hit here. And this is an arrowhead hatchling. This shouldn't be too bad. But so as you'll see, basically it's a ramp mechanic. The more I swing at this guy, the more damage he's taking, and the more buffed I am. Here I'm at 15 might, just from hammer auto-attacking. People don't realize that about hammer, but it's a weapon that as long as you manage to land lots of autos, you can, like, snowball to a degree. And it means that even though Scrapper itself is very tank-oriented, if it's able to be sturdy enough to consistently land the auto attacks, its pressure does go up and up and up, which you'll see has more synergy for its later traits. So actually, in terms of a pure design perspective, I really like how hammer auto kind of interacts with the entire flavor and flow of the elite specialization. Next, we have Electro Whirl. So here we spin around, reflecting missiles and hitting enemies. So this is a beautiful little animation here. Let's check this out. We spin like so. You get a really nice sound effect on there too. And what you'll notice is this is 2 separate hits, so it will break an Aegis or a blind, and then it will hit afterwards. But the number on there is enormous. 2,234. That's before we look at crits and other modifiers. That's a big hit. This is a nuke ability. I mean, I really do mean that. If you use a lot of hammer in PvP, you play the right way, you can do insane pressure with Electro Whirl. And its cooldown is pretty low as well. It's quite easy to miss. You have to be really tightly next to someone. But the other nice benefit here is that it reflects missiles. So if we were near a Mordrum Shadow Leaper or something, I don't really see any in the area here, and we proc this, we could reflect it into their face. And if we've just stacked a ton of might, say, from the auto or something, our reflect might even do good damage. I would say you don't get many, like, pressure modifiers and things, so the reflect isn't really that big of a deal. Heart of Thorns had a lot of stuff. When we get to Dragon Hunter, you'll see a similar thing with their longbow, where it's like they put quick reactive single fire and forget reflects on various skills. And I like the idea, but in actual gameplay, the game moves a bit too fast for me to ever, like, see, oh god, there's a big projectile coming, I'll reflect it with this. Maybe if I was against a kill shot warrior or against a dragon hunter in the middle of a true shot, I could counter with this. But it's not a play that I often end up utilizing. And in PvE and in raids and so on, it's not something I think about much either. Pretty much just spam this because it's big-ass damage. It's also a whirl, which means if we drop, like, a lightning field, and remember, we're an engineer, we've got billions of fields, so I could go bomb kit 2 or something. If we whirl in this now, we fire some burning bolts around, and, you know, that's kind of fun. Next, we have a very fun skill. This is called Rocket Charge. Now, don't confuse this with Rocket Boots that already exist on Engineer. So these are the Rocket Boots. They move you really far. They're a gadget. They obviously get you tool belt skill because they're a utility, and, you know, you can trait them to be kind of ridiculous. The Rocket Charge is a little bit different. Let's put a gyro back on here, and this is how it looks. It's kind of a segmented leap, a bit similar to how Ranger Greatsword 3 can feel sometimes, especially under laggy scenarios, but check this out. So here we go. We rocket, 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 and we slam and explode toward the end. So that's the animation. This is actually a really detailed animation that if you super slow down and look at it, you can see all this incredible little stuff. Like, I think there's shells coming after each mini explosion and stuff that most people miss. Really cool, but in terms of mechanics, it's fantastic too. So notice, we've had a reflect. Now we're going to get an evade. So this is evading as you move. Each individual swing is a packet of damage. Okay, and also each one is a leap. Not each one's a leap. There's 2 leap finishes on this, right? So if we're in a water field, and you're going to see we'll get water field in a second, we can heal twice, and leaps in water fields are huge, right? So we can actually get a double heal out of this while evading, and there's okay damage on it, and its mobility. This skill is loaded. It's very, very, very strong. and using it regularly and using it in fields is a big part of playing a Scrapper. In fact, when we have a look at the traits in a second, you're going to see Scrapper does a lot with like lightning fields and things, and here you can see a very easy way to double combo out of a lightning field just on the rocket charge. Fun skill, and a very defensive skill too. Speaking of defensive skills, next we have Shock Shield. Here's how it looks. We kind of slam a shield out in front of ourselves, like quite far out in front. And the idea is, I guess, we're conjuring it or something with our hammer. Conjuring is probably not the right word, since there's not supposed to be much magical influence on this class. But here, Shock Shield. Block attacks while striking foes in front of you, gaining barrier with each enemy that you hit. So here's our barrier. So once again, this is a skill that actually does okay damage. And you'll notice there's 10 vulnerability on it. So here, we'll come over to these beetles to represent this. We'll aggro the beetle. And then as it attacks, I'll go for a block. Block, block, block. And you'll see the damage. We started autoing after that. But you saw the damage rolled up, rolled up, rolled up. And if you look at my health bar when I did that as well, I got a good amount of barrier coming out of the back. Here I'll demonstrate the rocket leap and the electro whirl on the beetle as well, as you guys can see there. Obviously, we have some other traits firing, but still. So yeah, this is just another good defensive skill that is both offensive and defensive. You'll notice that about all of these so far. There's pressure while you're defending yourself. There's pressure while you're defending yourself. There's pressure while you're defending yourself. Finally, we have Thunderclap. So Thunderclap, I actually think, is an elementalist skill from Guild Wars 1. And you'll see how lightning-y themed the whole hammer is here, by the way. And that's a theme that's kind of go through with Scrapper. It's kind of, I actually think another name for Scrapper, believe it or not, is Electrician, seriously. It's so electric-oriented, and it seems to be about so many... Like here, Thunderclap, ionize an area, bringing down the power of lightning to stun foes and damage them over its duration. So this is a lightning field. So we can whirl out of the lightning field, and we can leap out of the lightning field just on the left-hand side of our bar, with the field being provided too. I believe the devs used to have a rule where they were very careful about having fields and finishers on the same weapon sets. But once Heart of Thorns came, stuff like that started breaking down big time. And here we can see a great example of just the strength of that. So this is a huge scale. I'll just show you the animation. First of all, we get a really flashy, nice ground target here. You can see with the lightning. We can cast it very far away. You'd think this would be 900 range or something, since we are on a melee kit. But no, this is a 1200 range skill here that you can tag on something super far off. I'll cast it close, though. We see a big lightning strike come down, and it creates this big field of electricity, which will pulse significant damage. So there's going to be 5 packets on there. The number here is reading nearly to 4,000, okay? Compare it to Electro Whirl, which I described as fairly nukey, okay? Which was nowhere near that. This one obviously has a much higher cooldown, right? This one also stacks a little bit of vulnerability as you go. Now, really, it's the stun on activation that you care so much about. Here's a spike throw. We might be able to actually reflect him. Let's see, when he aggroes on us. There we go. We got a nice little reflect there. But the Thunderclap, really, it's the stuns that you're looking for. The stun is super nice. And then it's very natural to use a combo field 3 out of that, because then you can like get a double daze off of the back of it, right? So this is a great skill, and it's one of the main reasons why Hammer kind of works, to be honest. It's one of those things that allows you to run away from someone, and you can cast it behind yourself with no fear, and you've stunned your guy that's pursuing you, so you can keep going. It's brilliant for helping take out break bars. If you are against a big break bar, then obviously the 5, you've got a big stun straight into double daze, as long as there's no other fields that are kind of messing with you at that point. But yeah, it's a nice set, and Hammer is one of my favorite new weapons that they added with elite specializations for Heart of Thorns at the very least. There is one more discussion to have about Hammer, and that's where it sits with Engineer in general. So Engineer was a class with very limited weapons. It had double pistol, a shield for the offhand, and a rifle. And pretty much all of those, you can just say are ranged. As far as pressure is concerned, they're ranged. So it kind of makes sense to add Hammer onto this set so that it can be melee. But Scrapper is a weird one in that there was always, say, like, the toolkit. So you're actually kind of comparing Hammer to toolkit more than... I mean, toolkit is literally a wrench, right? And the theme of the Hammer for Scrapper is a wrench. I've always wanted a bit more synergy between the toolkit and, like, Hammer playstyles. But they kind of overlap in a weird way, right? So that's the thing that I would say that Hammer was in most competition for. But Hammer is just way, way, way stronger than the toolkit. And since Heart of Thorns, I actually feel like we see a lot less toolkit gameplay. Not just because it's been directly usurped by Hammer or anything, but it's an interesting thought. So there you go. That's the weapon. Let's deal with the rest of the way that the class works now. We've got some really fun utility skills to look at and some brilliant traits too. So let's scroll on down and see what our core mechanic change is. It's called Function Gyro. You gain access to the Function Gyro, which can finish a foe or revive an ally for you at range. Then you also gain access to Gyro skills. So, the Function Gyro has very, very, very recently just gone through some changes. It used to be that it was just an extra thing on top of your class that worked like a context F skill for you. So you'd press F as you were prompted. Just like if I walk up to an NPC and I press F to speak to them, well, I could press F to trigger a Function Gyro. And it was basically an ability to range stomp or ranged res someone. That's all. You would press F and it would summon the gyro and away it would go. Well, now that is different and it's instead an F5. Now, this is actually in some ways better because now we can actually ground target it. So here you see you got a gyro ground target here. This looks different to the hammer one we saw. And I can cast this in any area. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to airdrop a little robot, a small creature that will attempt to resurrect or to stomp. If you're doing this in PvP, which is where that's most relevant, players can break the robot. The robot can be given stab and stuff. But in general, it's kind of a way to be able to quickly deal with a down state while you continue playing somewhere else. Or if you don't have any stability, you can summon the robot and stomp yourself, and the enemy might not be able to crowd control the both of you. You know, it depends on what down state you're dealing with and stuff. So it's very strong, but you can see how it really significantly interacted just with PvP. Now with the recent change, it does have a bit more application elsewhere because it's a full-on skill, and it's become your F5. So what this means is if you take Scrapper, you do not get your regular F5s, okay? So if I go Supply Crate, I can't drop the med packs anymore. If I go Elixir X, I can't mini mow it anymore. If I go Mortar, I can't orbital bombard, I think it's called, anymore. I only ever get Function Gyro. That does mean, by the way, past iterations of Scrapper had a totally different skill on the kit. If they ran their new Elite, which we haven't talked about yet, we'll get to soon, they would have a skill called Detection Pulse on their F5. Detection Pulse has actually been deleted from the game now. It's not a thing. It basically was a mass reveal. Maybe we'll see Scrappers engineers get that back somewhere else later, but we'll have to see. In general, though, now you've just got this skill. And it's got a little bit more application. I'll read the full tooltip. Create a lightning field at the specified point. Then summon gyros, plural, to finish foes and revive allies within the field. The recharge of this skill is increased for each gyro created beyond the first. So, you can now AoE Function Gyro, which is a bit of a buff for Scrapper in those competitive formats where it had been falling behind a little bit. But also, now you just get a lightning field. No matter what format I'm in, there's no downstates here, obviously, but I can, I could use this to revive people in open world. It's perfectly fair. We got a ton of players doing pylon events over here, right? I could run over and I could res people. I could res NPCs and things too. In fact, maybe we can find an NPC on the map here somewhere, a downstate icon. Doesn't look like there's any nearby. And, you can revive people, but now you can do it AoE. It's just the cooldown goes up if you try and go for that AoE value. But even in a situation where none of that's going on, I can just do this. I can drop it, and I can get a lightning field. And our traits allow us to work with that lightning field to a certain extent. It's not the greatest thing in the world. Like, for example, you just saw I got super speed there. And we'll look at why that is in a second. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's something, and it's helped to round Scrapper out just that little bit more. I actually think that future balance will continue looking at this, and we may see even more application for this in PvE and world versus world, which is kind of the middle ground, obviously, right? So yeah, that's your F5 now. There's not much more to say about that just yet until we get into other traits. Then we have gyros. So gyros are our new utility skills. On engineer, of course, when we slot a utility skill, we get a tool belt skill too. So it's kind of like we get double utility skills here. The balance is still the same in that tool belt skills are not as potent as the actual utility itself, but they have separate cooldowns and you can play with them in a fun way. So let's take a look at them. First of all, at the heal skill. So Scrapper's heal skill is, and the point of me making this video, I'm pretty sure, mathematically the highest heal in the game. Like in terms of just raw heal and value that you get out of it, It's crazy. They're all also called gyros, okay? So the function gyro that we were already looking at is that's the function gyro. But these are all gyros too, and this one's called the medic gyro. So we've got to look closely at the animation here. It used to be you could summon these gyros like minions and they would exist separate from you and so on. But nowadays, they've been reclassified to wells, okay? So wells like we see on Chrono, wells like we see on Necromancer. What engineers wells are a little different in that they're not ground targeted. They are point blank area of effect that travel with you, okay? So when I summon, well, we'll kill this guy so that it doesn't mess with the animations too much. When I summon one of these gyros, it's gonna hover around my shoulder and walk with me. It is not a different NPC, it's just an animation on us. So check this out, ready? Medic gyro, I'll summon it. And look over my shoulder here. Here's the medic gyro. And here you can see I've got a field. And as I walk around, the gyro stays with me. And the field stays with me. So this is actually a really good support element to these utility skills. In that when I summon my gyros, if I stand next to my allies, I give them benefits too. So that's the idea of these gyros. And if you summon them all, which I'll do right here. I'm going to summon just a ton of them. If you look, you'll see them all floating around my head here. You know, like a little army. But without the visual noise problems that Guild Wars 2 struggled with a lot in the past. You know, if I were to summon 5 of those under original Scrapper design, it would be awful. They'd just be spamming up the screen and they'd get AoE down and all this kind of stuff. Now, I actually think it looks much cleaner. I kind of wish they looked a bit bigger. But hey, and in fact, at all times, you'll notice I do have a little gyro here. This is our F5 gyro. This is our function gyro. You see, he's actually standing there. And then when we ground target, we actually rocket him away. If he had something to do over there, he'd move over there now and he'd start rezzing. And you can now see that he's not over our shoulder. So that's a nice little thing as well. When you're playing a Scrapper, you kind of get this extra little visual thing that's always with you. So, Medic Gyro. It's a heal skill. So deploy a Medic Gyro to heal yourself and any nearby allies. Our personal heal is pretty big. But then, for the next 5 pulses, the next 5 seconds, it's going to keep pulsing on us. The most awesome thing about this, though, is it's a water field. A bit like with that Tempest stuff, if you guys saw my introducing the Tempest video. It's a mobile water field that we can move around with. And that means, if I'm running along healing, and I use my hammer 3, I combo. But not only that, if I move with Rocket Charge, I combo and the gyro comes with me. So when it comes to the second combo, I combo again, right? It's just baked in synergy like that. Really nice. What Medic Gyro does even better, though, is when you look at its Tool Belt skill. So its Tool Belt is kind of the same thing. It's called Reconstruction Field. And back when this gyro was like a separate thing, you casted differently, these felt very distinct. Nowadays, they kind of overlap in a weird way. But check it out. Reconstruction Field is also a mobile water field. This one, you don't get like the gyro animation, and I think that's a bit weird these days. But check it out. Establish a defensive field granting protection to allies. So this one pulses prot and is a water field. So check this out. And we can do the same thing again. It doesn't last as long, but 3 ticks of protection is super major, guys. Protection is obviously really high value on any kind of play style that this elite specialization is clearly being built around. You know, you want to feel tanky, you want to be that tanky kind of guy, then you're going to want protection on there, right? And so here you get some baked in. But you got to remember, we're engineer too, right? So if we take a look at inventions, anti-corrosion plating exists on this class. Purity of purpose exists on this class as well over in alchemy. When you grant protection, cleanse. So I can create this field, and this is 3 to myself and anyone else, and all of us will be cleansing every time as well. So this is now like some epic cleanse with the big combo field finisher, with, you know, all the blasts that are on the class too. It's insane. So combo together, this heal skill is really, really, really strong and not to be underestimated. I love the Medic Gyro, and I don't think I ever, if I'm a Scrapper, I don't think I ever run any of the other heals. I really don't. And it's competing against Heal Turret. Heal Turret is its own level of insanity, okay? But even Heal Turret is not better to me than Medic Gyro, especially if I'm on Hammer. I mean, Jesus. So, yeah, there you go. That's the heal. Moving on, we've got we've actually got 4 utilities to look at. Starting off with the Blast Gyro. This is actually probably my favorite gyro, just in terms of visuals and stuff. So, this is a well. And by the way, as wells, these would combo with, like, Chronomancer runes, which means you get quickness as you cast them. We'll look at an interesting build that might synergize with that later. But check it out. Unleash a Blast Gyro to begin a countdown to a tremendous blast. So, most gyros are continually affecting the area as they're established, okay? Like this guy, he's constantly doing things, right? However, the Blast Gyro doesn't really pressure anything. It's just a big countdown. It goes 3, 2, 1, boom, and it's a giant explosion. That's the idea of the skill. You'll see it's got a massive damage modifier on there. You'll see that it's a blast. So, you could blast, say, in a thunderclap or something if you wanted. But also, it's a massive launch. It's a massive blowout. So, let's see what the animation looks like. Here you get this beautiful ring descending, a bit like a raid tail. It collapses into you and it explodes. And in fact, if you look really closely around my feet during that animation is where you get all this awesome, like, little bits of animation swirling around me. Really, really, really cool skill. The telegraph on this is what I like the most, to be honest. It's really fun in the PvP formats where you can see it ticking down and then it's really satisfying to dodge and really important to dodge. If you think about this, the idea of what this elite specialization is about, when it comes to PvP, it's more about holding nodes and sort of bunking and being sturdy on points. And one important thing for any playstyle like that is to have a blowout, right? To actually be able to get people away, to get quick neutralizations and stuff. And that's where this is strong. As far as PvE is concerned, any playstyle like this, you want to be able to contribute to break bars and stuff too. And there you go. Once again, it's got all the stuff that we looked at on Hammer, but a massive launch. That's always going to be brilliant. I kind of lied a second ago. It does have some benefit while it's established. It gives might. So let's watch it again. As it's rolling down, we get might, all the way up to 12. And 12 is a really nice threshold to hit because of some of our traits we'll look at in a second. But also, it means, look at the tooltip now. It's gone all the way up to like 1,900 while all that might was on us, even over 2,000. So if you're in open world, if you're in living story, if you're in a place where you can't guarantee your friends are always giving you might, this has like synergy for itself. It means the blast is not only really strong, but it's always going to be even stronger because you're always going to have a lot of might right when it lands, except in very fringe scenarios. So I love the Blast Gyro. One final really awesome thing about the Blast Gyro is the tool belt skill. Engineer is a class that really struggles for stun breaks. And this is the only stun break that was added with Scrapper. There are no traits, no weapon skills, no utility skills that give you a stun break except the Blast Gyro's tool belt. So you'll notice how I actually have this on my first utility slot. That's so that as far as my keybinds are concerned, I can get to this button quickly because this is a really important one. It's called Bypass Coating. It's a stun break. So that alone is the most important thing here. But on top of that, splash a hyper coating on nearby allies, granting them super speed. So here I'll show you guys what it looks like. We splash this on the ground. Might be a little bit reminiscent of Slick Shoes, of course. A bit uninspired, actually, considering Slick Shoes are in the game. But then we get to run around really quickly. My allies do as well. This isn't actually an AoE stun break. I feel like this is one of those situations where it could be. But those are very hard to kind of play with anyway, so hey. But there you go. So that's Bypass Coating, and it really makes Blast Gyro generally worth a slot. Like, this guy just stunned me. The whole way through this video, every time I've been getting CC'd, I've been resisting the temptation to use Bypass Coating, seriously. Because, it's just such a nice... And the cooldown's not too bad either, on 30 seconds. You gotta remember something about Scrapper, and especially, or Engineer, and anything when it comes to tool belts. These are always available. It doesn't matter if you're in a kit. It doesn't matter what you're doing. This is available. 30 seconds is 30 seconds, and that means a lot. Next, let's take a look at the Shredder Gyro. Even though Blast Gyro has good damage on it, this is actually a higher pressure gyro. So deploy a Shredder to attack foes near you and repeatedly use whirl finishers. So more combo finishers. You could put this in a thunderclap and then just do tons and tons of combos out of it. But let's check this out. I'll just show you the animation straight away. You should have a good idea. The Shredder Gyro is the yellow one. I like how the visual representation of them in-game, the model, actually is the same as the colors that they are on the tooltip too. But basically, it's just a spinning hell of blades that anyone close to you just keeps getting hit and hit and hit. Obviously, this is very dangerous if you're casting it into retaliation or whatnot, but it's a strong skill with lots of pressure. And the whirl finisher means, there's a kind of an idea of playing like a Condi play style and then using tons of burn whirls or something. I don't actually think that's very realistic, but this is a fun skill. This is very plain, though. This is basically one of the most basic skills that you can have on Scrapper. You just run around doing damage, right? The strike interval is extremely low. It hits 12 times, and if they all land, well, yeah, it's good damage. You'll notice there's a really low cooldown as well. This is the lowest cooldown gyro, so you can just keep throwing it out, throwing it out, throwing it out. Its tool belt equivalent has great synergy with it too. It's called the spare capacitor. This sets down a lightning capacitor to daze and damage foes near it. So this dazes on drop. It is a lightning field, which means that you get the combo, like it combos with itself. You're basically always going to set down the spare capacitor, and this is what this looks like, and then you're going to use the Shredder in it. and you go brutal bolts, brutal bolts, brutal bolts, brutal bolts, if you do, you know, the timing a little bit better. But this is super strong. Look at this. A daze straight away, even more CC, a combo field, and it's good damage. This is a stationary version of the Gyro, almost, it feels like, right? Which is kind of actually, I think, how they should be treating Reconstruction Field now. I don't know. But yeah, so these two are just made for each other. Thing is, there's not much quality of life on them. If someone stands in them, then yeah, or if you've got a nice stationary boss, you can pressure it really hard. In fact, I'll show you guys what this looks like on an arrowhead. It's especially fun on hammer because you can combo it with like thunderclap, which is it's like thunderclap, spare capacitor, and shredder gyro all feel like they're the same thing. They're just crazy fields of electricity rolling around, right? So I really have always had fun with this idea. And you know, you're an engineer as well. There's more of this that you can do in terms of fields and like area control. But you can kind of just spam these out, and like Hammer 3, you see we rip through the brake bar, just pressure, 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 and then they die. So, yeah, for PvE and open world, I actually love the Shredder Gyro, and it's one of my, you know, all-time most used gyros for that reason. Now, speaking of quality of life, let's go to the next one. This is going to be the Purge Gyro. So, you know, we're a tanky class. Conditions exist. You need some way of getting through them. We've already looked at a couple in terms of protection on the Reconstruction Field and synergies with the Invention Straight Line. But here we've got Purge Gyro. Deploy a Purge Gyro to remove conditions from you and your nearby allies. So it's conditions removed, 1 per pulse. You're going to get 5 of them. It's also a light field, okay? So if I blast... how can I actually do this? Because the Blast Gyro is a fire field. Yeah, by the way, this is a mobile fire field, so, you know, you're going to blast in this. You're going to give even more AoE might and stuff. That's why the last tick is so high. I'm not sure. As far as I want to just show you the gyros, I'm not really going to be able to show you that too easily. But here, as a light field, we could, like, do stuff in this to give ourselves light aura. Say, like, leap in it, which is even more condition damage reduction. But removing all these conditions on such a low cooldown, 20 seconds again, as you can see, just like the Shredder Gyro, is massive. Especially when you look at, like, Alchemy and you take Purity of Purpose. If you're going Purity of Purpose and Anti-Corrosion Plating, and you drop a Purge Gyro, if someone puts Vulnerability on you, the Gyro will get rid of the vulnerability, Purity of Purpose will turn it into Protection, and then Protection will remove another condition. It's so incredible, and this is a very, very, very strong skill. Its Tool Belt variant is very boring, though. This is one of my least favorite things on Scrapper. I don't really like it. It's just called the Chemical Field. It's Generator Poison Cloud. So you go. You get a little bit of poison. It does do poison. It's a poison fields. But, you know, often I'll be playing, like, Mortar and stuff, and it feels like, you know, I already have the Poison Gas Shell, right? It's pretty much just Poison Gas Shell, but here, very, very uninspired. I'd like to see the devs do something with this at some point. You know, it's a bit of pressure in, like, really long-term engagements, but mostly you're going to kind of ignore it, and it feels pretty lame. So there you go. That's the Purge Gyro. This is one where it's really imbalanced. It's not that both halves complement each other very well, like, say, the Shredder Gyro, or on the Blast Gyro, one of them is extremely good. This one's just like, the Purge Gyro itself is nearly all the value you get from it. And the other part, not so much. Though, obviously, you can blast weakness out of this. And, you know, that's kind of nice, because you reduce the damage that you're taking. So, last but not least, we have probably the most overpowered Gyro. Probably, in most scenarios. It's called the Bulwark Gyro. So this had a big rework recently. You remember at the start of this video, I mentioned barrier? Well, get ready, guys. We've seen a little bit, but we're about to see a ton. Bulwark Gyro. Deploy a Bulwark to grant you barrier and redirect damage to you from nearby allies. So here's the idea. We're really tanky, so we can drop this Gyro, and we can absorb health from other people. This is a mechanic we've seen a little bit in the game already. Say, Mesmers had their Phantasmal Defender and stuff. I actually think that the idea of Bulwark Gyro should be a Grandmaster Minor trait. Or, you know, something passively built into Scrapper that you're not teching a whole slot for. And then they can really kind of build around it. And then you feel the value of being the tanky guy, right? This is kind of the fantasy, being the hero that takes the aggro or whatever. But in terms of Guild Wars 2, this is a way they can emulate that. But as it stands, it's actually just a really weird skill. In that most of the time you just use it selfishly. You don't care about the damage redirection. You just use it to get a ton of barrier. So the idea is we press it. The Gyro comes out. We get our little fields. And look at my barrier here. Look at how much it's pulsed up. I basically maxed out my barrier there. And I'm on a really aggressive set right now, by the way. I'm on like all Zerk and stuff here as I shoot this video. So we just get ludicrously tanky from this. And then also, if there's other allies, we get even more. So if I cast this next to someone, right? I don't know if I can get to this guy in time, right? Yeah, he's kind of jumping around. But if I cast it next to him, I'll get the value from that, and I can just kind of walk away, right? So this is just a very selfish skill that I think the devs don't want to be a selfish skill. The combo field you get on it as it rolls is lightning this time. So you see we've got fire, we've got we've got finisher, sorry. We've got a light field, and here we've got a lightning field. We've got water here. So they're all kind of covered except poison. Though the tool belt kind of rounded that out. So it's very strong. And then even better, you've got the defense field too. So project a defensive dome around yourself and grant stability to nearby allies. So this one's insane. Create this big bubble. Get to roleplay as a guardian to a certain degree. This is not reflection, it's just deflection, but it's very, very major for the kind of projectile-heavy encounters that you might end up going in, depending on what kind of format of the game you're playing. And it's AoE stab for everyone. Again, this is a class that's limited on stun breaks, so having stab on Scrapper is really important, and this is one of your biggest tools for getting it. So yeah, the combo of like Blast plus Bulwark is really strong. Like the ultimate tank is to run like this setup here with a Gyro. Seriously, it's so strong. You've got Stun Break, you've got Stab, you've got Blowouts, you've got Barrier, you've got Cleanse. Like, it's so well-rounded, it's ridiculous. So there you go, that's all the Gyros until the Elite. So the Elite Gyro does not get a tool belt anymore. That was the skill that was deleted. So we only have one thing to look at. It's called Sneak Gyro. 45-second cooldown. And look at this. Deploy a Sneak Gyro to provide stealth to nearby allies. So back in the day, this used to summon a separate NPC that would apply stealth around it. So players could see the NPC and, you know, damage it. And then they could break it and thus reveal everyone hiding under it. That was a really cool interaction that I thought meant a lot. You could go after the Sneak Gyro, but you don't know how many players are being protected. And then maybe it's a huge mistake to walk near it because maybe you're in World vs. World and it's hiding like a ton of players. However, now it's very different. It's basically just an AO. It's like Mass Invis for the Mesmer, but mobile. So check it out. We drop the Sneak Gyro. He's standing up here, but enemies will not see him, okay? Because he's just an animation. He'll get stealth with us, and we just run around in stealth. It is a smoke field, so you can even blast in it to extend the stealth duration, but look how much stealth I've got. Look at this. This is crazy. This is insane amounts of stealth, and it's AoE. By the time the stealth runs out, I've only got like 26 seconds until this is off cooldown again. So the uptime is ludicrous. That's before you even start looking at like alacrity and stuff that people might give you. The stealth uptime is insane. In fact, this is so crazy since the rework. They actually went back and looked at Mass Invis on the Mesmer and buffed that one too because the disparity was just so incredible. It's 3 seconds of stealth every pulse and 6 pulses. That's before we look at blasts. And we are an engineer. If I do it in this order, the first field should be smoke and we should get the value. There you go. So we get another stealth there. So this is like epic disengage. It's a very strong skill. What it means is if you're trying to be really tanky and you're like outnumbered, say in World vs. World or PvP, you've got to get away, or you're in a really hard scenario in PvE, maybe you're really struggling against a boss fight in the living world or something, you can just pop this and nothing will attack you anymore. You could just move away, get yourself out of combat, reset your health, and go back in, right? And start hitting the boss again before it starts regenerating too much health or whatever. It's very strong. I do tend to lean to Mortar Kit just a little bit more because Chill and Blind Fields and stuff are so insane and they complement the playstyle when you're like on point. But Sneak Gyro is fantastic, and it's a real staple of the class now. I really like it. So there you have it. We'll even have a way to trait these in a second, and that's what we're going to look at now. We're going to look at the traits and see how this all comes together with our specialization line itself. So let's roll on through first through the minors. There you go. Function Gyro. We get the Gyros. We get the Gyro skills. Next, Speed of Synergy. Every scrapper in the game gets this. Use a Leap finisher. Grants you super speed. Using a blast finisher applies super speed around you. So you might notice this. When I blast Gyroed, it's a fire field, then it blasts its own fire field, and then it triggers my trait. Okay? So I get super speed after I've blown someone out, so I can rapidly run over to them and finish them off or whatever, if that's what I really want to do. So there's just tons of super speed, and it's AoE. This is really nice. Like one of the raid encounters, the Spirit Run, you can use this on like various NPC allies and just make them charge around. And it's not just because of this, but because it's one of the gyro traits as well. This is a class that has lots of barrier, lots of super speed, is kind of electrically themed. And if you're looking for super speed, Scrapper is the way to go here. Speed of synergy. So you might have noticed as well, when we used the Thunderclap skill 3 combo, we had super speed too. It kind of overlaps in a weird way on that because, you know, you're in the rocket charge anyway, and super speed won't speed up the rocket charge, but there you go. Next, we've got Impact Savant. Now, this one's pretty major for just the entire idea of Scrapper. A percentage of strike damage we deal is converted into barrier, but our vitality is reduced. So nowadays, there are trade-offs for running elite specializations. There's reasons why you might want to stay on a core build or pick a different specialization. The trade-off for Scrapper, if it's not just, you know, the whole F5 thing, it's this. You lose vitality. It's similar to how Berserker is structured now, losing toughness. So this is actually very major, because what it means is, yeah, you're tanky, but you're kind of like a Guardian in that you are burstable, right? If you don't dodge correctly, if you don't watch things coming in, no matter what format of the game you're on, you can be very quickly deleted. If you do play that very carefully, you can kind of just resustain like mad and you're just tanky enough. But the idea is you have low vitality, but you pad that back up with barrier, right? When I use the Bulwark Gyro, it's not like that vitality loss is really there anymore in a way, because the barrier is now climbed that back up. So you want to keep lots of barrier on yourself. And that's what this trait does. A percentage of the strike damage you deal is converted into barrier. So as long as you're doing damage, it's like the 300 vitality loss doesn't exist because you have a cushion of barrier. Now, keeping a cushion of 3,000 barrier on you all the time is pretty hard to do. But it means that you can go really tanky, in which case you're kind of burst susceptible and have less barrier. Or you can actually go kind of like hybrid. You can go pretty aggressive, but now you have the barrier, so you're still kind of tanky at the same time anyway. That's the idea of Impact Savant. And that's why, as you've noticed, I've been hitting beetles and things. These poor beetles, I don't know why I've been going on them so much. You know, let's just like Shredder Gyro this guy. If you look at my health here, you'll see we're getting little bits of barrier coming in. I mean, I'm barely hurting that guy at the moment. But, you know, I'm not using my Shock Shield, which is barrier too. And I'm not using the Bulwark Gyro. Well, now I am. But you see, we just keep getting little bits of barrier. Little bits of barrier, little bits of barrier. And so that's definitely something to look at, you know. And you might like to look at something like Sanctuary Runes, which also interact with barrier on Scrapper, okay? So that's the Grandmaster Miner. The idea is hit things and gain extra max health. All right, so now let's look at our major traits, the ones that we select. First of all, the Adept tier. So each of these traits in the first selection are about augmenting F5. They're about augmenting your function gyro. They add extra stuff to your function gyro. And then they have another effect too. These are all like double traits. One half of it affects your F5. The other half is just something passive for you. Double traits, okay? So, first of all, gyroscopic acceleration. Your wells have an increased area of effect, and on their final pulse, they grant super speed to nearby allies. Your function gyro also grants super speed to allies when cast. So, basically, crazy super speed. If I F5 now... Oh, I think I missed. I actually think I did that so badly, I missed. But this is 5 seconds of super speed, right, on my F5. I can do that to all my allies. It's pretty good. Then all my utility skills. Let's look at the Blast Gyro now. Look how much bigger this is now. Look at this. It's enormous. Massive field, and that means we're much more likely to blow someone out. And at the end, we super speed. If we heal now, we got a massive field. We can help people out a lot more. And at the end, we super speed. So I really like this trait because it doesn't actually mess with the efficacy of the gyros. Your gyros are just as powerful even if you don't take this trait. But it gives you like an extra dimension to working with on the gyros. And again, if you want to do a big super speed build, look at all the finishes you've got, right, for the minor trait. And now you can just stack gyros and just look at all of the barrier, not the barrier, sorry, all of the super speed that I can keep on my allies. I could just keep going and going and going with it and keep rolling. You put this on some kind of mission critical NPC, and, you know, they're really going to race on through. So, very, very fun trait. This is actually one of my favorite in this first selection. And I do definitely recommend it no matter what area of the game you guys are playing in. It's a super fun one. Next, System Shocker. This one's really good too, honestly. Improves the effectiveness. So, one half is that it will improve the effectiveness of all finishers in lightning fields by 50%. So what does that actually mean? Well, it means that if you're dazing from a hammer 3 out of Thunderclap, the daze will last longer. If you're doing brutal bolts, then the vulnerability will last longer. I don't think it means extra stacks of vulnerability, though I haven't actually fully verified that. Maybe you guys can check that in the comments. Just like, you can take this trait, and now when you're on hammer, that guy evaded quite comfortably, and again, you can really keep those little daze packets rolling and rolling and rolling. It's pretty nice. I wonder if you ran like Mesmer runes, you could compound that even further. But so there's that half of it, and then again, the function gyro changes to daze on cast. Well, what do you know? What a surprise. Oh my god, this guy actually blew us up somehow. But basically, yeah, now when we function gyro down on top of someone, that's dazing too. So you can do your cool combos, say with the shredder gyro, with various hammer interactions, and then you can slap someone down towards the end as well with another daze on top. So super speed, daze, or mass momentum. Now, this is kind of your damage trait, and a lot of PvEers will run this. Gain might when you have stability. So that's the first half. Any place that you give yourself stabs. So say we're on the Bulwark or anything else from Engineer, obviously. But now Bulwark Gyro is giving me might as well, as you can see, and it just keeps rolling. We'll look at stability a lot more heavily in a second. We're actually getting to a point now where the meta is reset, so there's going to be loads of Mordrums standing around here. It's suddenly not going to be very safe. But so, might on stability, and there's a very fun special build and interaction we can talk about with that in a second. But then also, function gyro applies stability to allies. So it's only one stack. I actually think as far as the function gyro effects go, this one's the weakest. I think 5 seconds of super speed is way stronger than 1 stack for 3 seconds of stab. I just don't think it's the same in any way. And then even I think the daze, you know, a bit of an interrupt. I mean, maybe this is on par actually. Maybe it's just that this one's stronger. But yeah, so massive momentum really is about lots of might stacking. I already talked about the fact there's a lot of might stacking on hammer. Well, now even when you're not running hammer, as long as you have stab, you can keep going with it. And there's definitely a big synergy there. So now let's look at the master selection. We now move away from augmenting our F5. We've got the damage dampener. This is a really weird trait. There's nothing else like it in Guild Wars as far as I know. A percentage of all strike damage that we take is stopped and then delivered later after a delay. So remember what I was saying about how burstable you are because of your low vitality? This trait kind of takes that edge off, right? Because if someone's going to crit me for 13,000 health, which is my max health, instead of one-shotting me, he can't one-shot me now. Instead, it gets split up and the next packet's a bit later. And by the time the next packet comes in, I might have hit him and I've given myself barrier. And now the barrier is a supplement for me. This actually feels a lot like some Guild Wars 1 skills, right? And some fun, it reminds me a bit of like 600 farming. It's not the same at all. But it's an interesting trait in that it's definitely playing with that kind of low vitality barrier resustain element. And so there you just saw I got hit. If I come to my combat log here, and we take a look at damage taken, you're going to see that we got hit by these tendril growths, and then later, damage dampener should appear on here somewhere. It usually does. Maybe it doesn't actually appear in the combat log. But anyway, it's later, every single packet of damage you take. And it's funny when you actually run this in PvP, which I sometimes do, you will look at your death log later and you'll see that there's like tens of thousands of damage you've taken just from the damage dampener, where all these random hits have been separated into smaller hits that maybe they're more incremental and you can actually deal with in a more comfortable way. I guess this does have some anti-synergy with like giving yourself Aegis or putting blind on opponents, but it's kind of nice for retaliation, I guess, too. Does it count as them doing both strikes? Because then if you retail yourself, you're kind of doubling your retail damage. That's a fun idea, isn't it? But I'm not sure whether mechanically it fully works that way. If it doesn't, it should, because that's a really fun interaction. Next, we've got Expert Examination. This one's a really simple trait. Stunning or dazing someone applies vulnerability and weakens them. Weakness is good for keeping yourself alive. Doesn't work always in PvE because of break bars, right? But here, now, if I thunderclap, you see we get the vuln and the weakness. The weakness is flashing grey there, which means it doesn't actually have any effect. But still, it's pretty nice. And, now our combos here. When we drop our spare capacitor rocket charge, if you looked at this guy's vulnerability, it's stacked way up. Because this is now a 10 vulnerability combo, right? Because we're doing the double finishes, which is dazing, which is putting 5 vulnerability each time. There is no ICD on this, right? So it's very quickly going to ramp you up to 25 vuln. And then that allows you to do damage even where you might not think that Scrapper had that much. That's where suddenly you're doing a really meaty electro well, so. And lastly, we've got Object in Motion. Deal increased damage, and this is like your damage trait. The big damage trait. Deal increased damage while you have Stab, Swiftness, or Super Speed, and the damage increase compounds for each effect you have. So this is a 15% modifier, basically, as long as you can keep all 3 of those effects on you. Swiftness, Super Speed, Stability. And you know that we've got loads of those on this class, right? And especially on Scrapper, we've seen Super Speed in abundance. Don't forget that there's now synergy here. If you take Mass Momentum, you're getting Might while you have Stab. And if you take this, you're getting a straight up damage modifier from having Stab too. So being able to juggle all 3 of these, the Stability and the Swiftness are very easy, and I'll show you how soon. The Super Speed can be a little bit more challenging, but thanks to our miner here, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's really not. So yeah, that's Object in Motion, and you know you're going to run all bottom if you're really finding PvE very easily. One thing I kind of really like about that trait is it's sort of like ArenaNet acknowledging, look, there's so much Super Speed on Scrapper that Swiftness is feeling useless, right? Because if you have both on you, you don't get anything out of it. But now you can take this trait and you do get something out of having both, which ordinarily would feel pointless. I kind of like that. Finally, let's look at our Grandmaster traits. These are going to be the big ones. First of all, Adaptive Armor. Barriers you receive are stronger. So remember, every hit we do gives us barrier from Impact Savant. Impact for Savant is now better if we take this Grandmaster. We also reduce incoming condition damage as long as we have barrier. So Scrapper's in an interesting place that as long as you are pressing buttons, you always have barrier. Even if it's a tiny little bit of barrier, you have barrier, right? As long as you're pressing buttons, you know? And in that situation, it kind of means, and maybe you have to build into it a little bit, you have very, very high, if not infinite uptime on just 20% less condition damage. That's really nice. And higher barrier increase. Pretty cool. Now, here's the thing. Barriers you receive are stronger. One of the things you're going to look at here is Rune of the Sanctuary. Maybe it's a crafted rune. Anyway, this is a rune that gives you barrier whenever you heal, okay? So a proportion of your heals come back in as barrier. It's a really powerful rune. Now, you might think, wow, Adaptive Armor means that all the barrier I get from healing from the rune is now 15% stronger. So isn't that just insane? But I tried looking into this a while ago. I don't think that interaction works. So don't get too taken away. I love the idea of a Sanctuary Rune Adaptive Armor Scrapper. But I think that that isn't actually fully in line. But that's an idea, and maybe one day the devs will look at that interaction. Maybe they already have. Next, Kinetic Stabilizers. Gain stability and super speed whenever we disable someone. So remember that this middle line, this is all the daze, right? And daze on F5. So now when we F5, if we take both of these, we daze him and stab ourselves. Yeah? And we get a good amount of stab. We also get the super speed there. And now, you know, if we were running the modifier trait, which we actually are, we're sustaining lots of these stacks. Look at that. 4 stability that I got there. 5 stability. Just from using random things. Just comboing on myself. Stability, stability, stability. That's what this is all about. Keeping crazy stability on yourself. It also, outgoing stun and daze durations are increased even further. So you're getting increased daze duration here and increased daze duration here. And, you know, I like the idea of Mesmer Runes stacking even on top of that. Really fun, the idea of the middle line, right? And massive vulnerability. Basically, as you apply many CCs, there's so much, like, compounding synergy in this. It's mental in this middle line. Really, really, really fun. So, yeah, that's all there is to say. And then finally, Applied Force. So this is a weird trait. It's a deceptive trait. But it was buffed very recently to be a lot stronger. So nothing about this class has really felt quickness oriented right now, right? Nothing. There's nothing quicknessy going on. But suddenly they give us a Grandmaster trait that's like quickness stuff. I don't know why. I think that this is a bit off, to be honest. But here, check it out. Gain quickness when we gain might at or above the threshold. And the threshold is 10 might. So remember what I said about the blast gyro before? That's why when we blast gyro, the final bit puts us to 12 might, we get quickness off the back. So as long as we keep giving ourselves little bits of might, we keep getting that quickness refreshed. Every 10 seconds, we get 3 seconds of quickness. So the uptime's okay. It could be better, and you can make it better by building concentration, of course. But then that's all this trait did for a long time. But now also, it's while we have quickness, we gain loads of power. We gain 200 power just from having that boon on ourselves. So there's very much an idea of a build where you run lots of wells. You take Chronomancer runes, which gives you quickness on wells. And then the quickness is giving you 200 power because of applied force. And you just want to keep that quickness going. Don't forget here, that we get might for as long as we have stability. So now we're getting might, and the might is trying to build to tick applied force up, okay? So there are ways to interact with this trait, and I think it is a fun trait, but it really feels like it's made for a different combination. You know, we've talked about alchemy, we've talked about inventions here, but what about a really damaging, what about a really aggressive scrapper, all the bottom line? Well, how could we really get a lot of value out of applied force? Well, there is something kind of beautiful. We want lots of stab for lots of might. Well, where can we get lots of stab on this class? Well, hold on. If we ran firearms, you can go Juggernaut. Juggernaut, oh my god, something just freaking nuked us. Okay, it's a champion, and we're a scrapper with low vitality. So you can see there we almost just died. So Juggernaut is holding a flamethrower, gives you permanent stability, and it gives you might, right? And your might lasts longer too. So this really feels like the devs liked the idea of flamethrower scrappers, okay? So if you take Juggernaut, we keep building might, and we keep building stability, which keeps building mass momentum, which keeps building applied force. So just standing here on this as a scrapper, we can sustain ludicrous uptime on those 3 boons. And then you've actually got like blast finishes and stuff on here too, which can give you super speed. And now, you know, you're rolling into object in motion. If you put a bit of concentration on this, you're kind of running around with 2 stacks of stab, shit tons of might, crazy amounts of quickness, roasting people in the face. And this is kind of like a really fun, mostly for PvE, open world, living world missions, in my opinion, silly variant that you can run. And then on top of that, you know, the idea of flamethrower is lots of packets of damage, just rolling out, rolling out, rolling out. Well, isn't that fun for the Shredder Gyro? Don't forget, you're not actively casting while you're in the Shredder Gyro. Here, I'm using my flamethrower while doing the gyro stuff, right? Your hands are free to keep raining down on this while these are going on. And so this is a very cheesy, very fun build. There's a brilliant middle ground here where you're doing so many mini packets, Impact Savant keeps coming up, that you can play a really, really frightening, you know, flamethrower guy exploring the jungle. And I think that's really kind of one of the fantasies the devs had in mind as they built this. Let's see how we do against these pocket raptors here. So as long as we get AoE cleave, we keep loads of barrier. Look at our barrier here. I have not Bulwark gyroed there. That's not Bulwark gyroed. That's just raining flamethrower strikes on these pocket raptors. You guys know how dangerous pocket raptors are. They'll chunk you down. You know how low our vitality is. They'll chunk you down. But they can't do it because the barrier is so high, because we just keep rolling this horrible stuff in their face. So, yeah, and you guys know, to have a good build, having a good, for like solo gameplay, means lots of solo might, means solo quickness, solo fury. Thankfully, in firearms, there's applications of Fury, right? Because you can take no scope. So, you know, you can do a lot of very cool things with this specific idea for Scrapper. And there you go. That's it. That's all the traits. That's all of the skills. That's how it works. That's kind of where it sits as far as 2019 and post the big reworks and the big updates. I hope you guys enjoyed my little discussion on this. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let me know if you feel like I missed something or there's a very fun Scrapper build and idea that wasn't discussed in this. And don't hesitate to check the rest of the series to see how the other elite specializations work. I guarantee there's a load I can teach you about them. And yeah, I hope you guys had fun. I'll see you for another one very, very soon. We've only got a couple of Heart of Thorns ones left now. See you guys there.